Go eat out on the street, you beggar. Those were the words my son Michael shouted when I tried to sit down at the table in the restaurant. I took a deep breath, motioned to the waiter and said calmly, "All right, but if that's the case then you'll be the ones leaving instead. If you're listening to this, please like the video, subscribe and drop a comment about where you're tuning in from." My voice was steady, more steady than even I expected. The whole dining room at the Golden Crown went quiet and every head turned toward us. Michael froze, his face burning red with embarrassment. His wife, Emily, dropped her wine glass onto the white tablecloth. But what my son didn't realize, what nobody in that room knew, was who I really am. My name is Linda. I'm 65 years old. And that night, everything was about to change forever. Let me take you back, because what happened after those words, nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted. It all started just 3 hours earlier when Michael called me. "Mom, I want to take you out to dinner at the best restaurant in town. I have something to celebrate and I want you there." His voice sounded different, almost mocking, but like always I wanted to believe he was finally letting me into his successful life. I got myself ready with so much care that evening. I pulled out my best dress, an emerald green one I'd bought years ago but hardly wore. I styled my hair carefully, put on a touch of makeup, and even chose the pearl earrings that once belonged to my mother. I wanted to look presentable for my son, the one who had made such a name for himself. Michael had done well in recent years. He was a regional manager at a big company, lived in a huge house in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods, and Emily was always dressed in designer clothes. But with me, his own mother, he had grown colder and more distant every year. I arrived at the Golden Crown right at 8 o'clock sharp. The place was stunning: white tablecloths, crystal glasses, waiters in tuxedos. The kind of restaurant where one dinner cost more than $200 a person. A place I knew well, though Michael had no idea. When I asked for Michael Carter's table, the maitre d', Daniel, gave me a quick look up and down. My green dress, though the best I owned, seemed plain compared to the elegant gowns the other women wore. "Of course, ma'am. Right this way," he said with a professional smile. I followed him through the rows of tables, feeling eyes on me from every direction. Some guests whispered, probably wondering what someone like me was doing there. Michael was already sitting at a table right in the center with Emily. She wore a gorgeous red dress, dripping with jewelry that sparkled under the lights. But then I noticed something that made my stomach sink. There wasn't a chair for me. "Hi, son," I said with a forced smile, hoping he'd stand up to hug me, or at least explain where I'd be sitting. Michael only smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, Mom, you're here." He didn't move. Emily didn't even look up. "And my chair?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your chair." Michael started laughing, but it wasn't warm. It was cruel. "Mom, I didn't invite you here to eat with us. I wanted you to see how successful people live, so you'd understand the difference between you and us." The words hit me like a punch. A couple at the next table turned, listening openly now. "Son, I don't understand," I whispered. "You don't understand?" He raised his voice. "Mom, look at yourself. Look at this place. Do you really think you belong here? We come every week. We spend more on one meal than you spend in a month." Emily finally spoke, still staring at her plate. "Michael, don't be so hard on her. It's not her fault she's, well, the way she is." Her words cut even deeper. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What they didn't know, what I had hidden all these years, was about to come out that night in the most unexpected way. "Michael, please," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I just wanted to spend time with you. We haven't talked in months." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, almost enjoying my humiliation. "Talk? About what, Mom? Your boring little life? Sitting in that tiny apartment watching soap operas." By now, everyone nearby was listening openly. A couple at the next table even exchanged pitying glances in my direction. I felt heat rising up my neck, but something inside whispered to stay calm. "Son, I've always worked hard," I said, holding my head high. "I don't have much, but I have my pride." Emily gave a little laugh. "Pride? Linda, forgive me, but what do you have to be proud of? You live in a 2-room apartment, ride the bus, and shop at discount stores." Every word felt like a knife, and yet what hurt the most was the satisfied smile on Michael's face. How had he turned into someone this cruel? Where was the sweet boy I once raised with so much love? "Mom," Michael went on, louder now so the whole room could hear, The truth is, I'm embarrassed to introduce you as my mother. Look at Emily. Look how she dresses, how she speaks, how she carries herself. That's the kind of woman who belongs with me. Emily smirked, adjusting her blonde hair. Her red dress must have cost over $1,000, and her shoes were from an Italian brand I knew all too well. Emily comes from an important family, Michael continued proudly. Her father owns 3 car dealerships. She went to private school, speaks 3 languages and knows business. And you? What do you have to teach me? How to scrape by on $200 a week. Tears threatened again, but I swallowed them back. There was so much Michael didn't know. Emily didn't know either. Nobody in my family knew. And tonight that secret was about to change everything. Daniel, the waiter, came quietly to our table. He knew me, though he couldn't say it then. His eyes held concern. Would you like anything else? He asked gently. No thank you, Michael cut him off. My mother won't be dining with us. In fact, I think it's time she left. But son, I whispered, my voice breaking, I thought you wanted to celebrate with me. Michael laughed again coldly. Celebrate with you? Mom, I'm celebrating my promotion, my new position, my successful life. Do you really think I'd celebrate that with someone who only reminds me where I came from? Emily and I are on a different level. That's just reality. He's right, Emily added, sipping her $100 wine. It's not personal, Linda, but we belong in places like this. We have the money, the education, the class. And you just don't. I looked around the restaurant. The chandeliers glowed softly, the artwork on the walls was real, and the piano played the perfect background. Every detail radiated elegance. Yes, it is beautiful, I murmured. Of course it is, Michael said arrogantly. It's the most expensive place in the city. There's a 3-month waitlist to get in. But when you've got money and connections like us, doors open. We know the manager, the chef, even the owner. Well, I know the owner personally. Emily nodded with pride. That's why we always get the best table. A small smile tugged at my lips. If only they knew who really knew the owner. Mom, why are you smiling like that? Michael asked, suspicious. Do you think it's funny that I'm teaching you how the real world works? No, son, I answered calmly. I was just thinking about one thing. You're right. There are differences that can't be ignored. Differences you don't know yet. But tonight they'll become very clear. Michael and Emily exchanged a nervous look. My voice no longer sounded like the quiet, submissive mother they thought they knew. What do you mean? Emily asked, uneasy. And before I could answer, another waiter walked up to the table. The man who walked up was Charles, the restaurant manager. Mid-50s, sharp suit, every move refined. Good evening, he said politely. Is everything all right here at your table? Michael immediately straightened in his chair, thrilled to have the manager's attention. Everything's perfect, Charles. As always, the service here is exceptional. Charles smiled, but when his eyes landed on me, I caught a flicker of recognition. Of course he knew me. I'm glad to hear that, he replied. Then he looked straight at me. Ma'am, are you enjoying your evening? It sounded like a simple question, but I knew there was more behind it. Michael didn't notice. I did. Charles was waiting for my signal. Charles, I said firmly, I think it's time you spoke with the owner. There's a matter here that needs his attention. He nodded slowly, almost like he'd been expecting those words all night. Of course, ma'am. The owner will be here in just a moment. Michael frowned, confused. The owner? Mom, do you actually know the manager here? Emily's head snapped up, just as bewildered. Linda, how do you know Charles? I only smiled. I didn't answer. The truth would be revealed soon enough. Michael tried to cover, turning back to Charles with his usual arrogance. Hey Charles, I'm not sure what my mom's talking about. She gets a little confused these days. Her age, you know. Charles kept his professional smile but said nothing. His silence made the air around our table grow heavier. Why aren't you answering? Michael demanded. Charles spoke carefully. I think it's best if we wait for the owner. He'll be able to clear up any doubts. Emily leaned closer to Michael and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. This is strange. Your mother's acting off. Do you think she's all there? Her words didn't cut me down. They fueled me. Because I knew, in a few minutes she'd choke on every last one of them. Around us the dining room had gone tense. Conversations faded. Diners leaned discreetly, trying to catch every word. Even the waiters had slowed their steps. Michael's patience snapped. Mom, enough. I don't know what game you're playing, but it stops now. Emily and I want to enjoy our dinner in peace. In peace, I repeated, my voice firm. Like the peace you've given me all these years? Like the peace of being treated like a stranger by my own son. Enough. Michael slammed his hand on the table. Glasses rattled. Heads turned openly now. You're making a scene. You're embarrassing me in front of important people. Emily gripped his arm. Calm down, honey. Everyone's staring. Exactly, he snapped, standing up, his face red with rage. Mom, I'm asking you to leave. Right now. You're ruining my night, my celebration, my reputation. I stayed seated, calm as ever. Your reputation? The reputation of a man who treats his mother like trash. You're not trash, he shot back, though his tone said otherwise. You're just different. You don't belong in this world. You're from a world of ordinary people, people without ambition, people who settle for less. The words echoed. Silence spread through the restaurant. Even the piano stopped mid-note. Emily stood as well. Linda, please. Michael's right. This isn't your place. Look around. People are staring at you with pity. He was wrong. They weren't staring with pity. It was curiosity. Expectation. As if they sensed something big was about to happen. Michael jabbed a finger at the table. Do you even realize how much this dinner costs, Mom? $300 so far. That's more than you spend in a month. And the wine? I asked smoothly. $250 a bottle. Dom Perignon 2015. An excellent choice. Michael blinked, stunned. How do you know that? Because I know this place very well, son. Very well. Emily laughed coldly. You? Since when? From reading the menu outside the window. A few people chuckled nervously. I didn't flinch. And then he appeared. A tall, commanding figure in his 60s, gray suit cut to perfection. The room seemed to hush as he walked toward us, Charles close behind. Michael's eyes lit up. Mr. Anderson. What an honor, sir. Michael Carter. We met briefly at the conference last month. Mr. Anderson gave him a polite nod, but his eyes were locked on me. Good evening, Linda. The way he said my name froze Michael in place. That wasn't how you greeted a stranger. That was how you greeted someone you knew, someone you respected. Good evening, Mr. Anderson, I replied naturally. I'm sorry you had to come down for this. Emily's face was twisted in confusion. Michael, how does your mother know Mr. Anderson? I don't know, Michael stammered. Mom, how do you know him? Mr. Anderson came closer, and even the diners who had been pretending not to listen gave up the act. Every eye in the room was on us. Mrs. Carter, he said formally. Is there a problem I need to resolve? The formal Mrs. Carter made Michael frown deeper. Why would a man like Anderson speak to me like that? Yes, there is, I said clearly. My son and his wife disrespected me tonight. Humiliated me, told me I don't belong here, and asked me to leave. Mr. Anderson nodded gravely. I see. And what would you like me to do about it? Michael jumped in, desperate. Wait, Mr. Anderson, there's a misunderstanding. My mother's exaggerating. I was just explaining that this place is a little too sophisticated for her. Anderson turned on him, eyes cold. Too sophisticated for her? Are you telling your mother she doesn't belong here? Michael stuttered. No, that's not it. It's just, well, she can't afford this place. She lives on $200 a week. This is out of her reach. Emily nodded quickly. Exactly. We weren't being cruel, just realistic. This place is expensive. Anderson's gaze returned to me. Is that true, Linda? You can't afford to dine here. A slow smile spread across my face. Finally, the moment I'd been waiting for. Well, Mr. Anderson, I said, rising to my feet, that depends on how you look at it. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope I'd been saving for years, waiting for this very moment. I set it down in front of Michael. What's this? Emily asked, suspicion sharp in her voice. Open it, I told Michael. Read it out loud. His hands shook as he slid out the documents. Emily leaned in. His face drained of color. No, this can't be. What does it say? Emily demanded. Michael's voice trembled as he read, Certificate of Ownership. The Golden Crown Restaurant. Owner, Linda Carter. Date of acquisition: March 15, 2018. The silence was crushing. Diners stood from their seats, straining to see. Emily snatched the papers. This is fake. Has to be. Linda, tell me this is a joke. Anderson cleared his throat. I assure you Mrs. Carter's documents are authentic. She is indeed the owner of this restaurant, and 4 others in this city. Michael's jaw dropped. Mom, this is impossible. You live in a tiny apartment. You ride the bus. You shop at discount stores. I sat back down, calm, powerful. It's true. I live simply because I choose to. But that doesn't mean I don't have money. Emily's voice barely rose above a whisper. How much? Anderson answered for me. Mrs. Carter's net worth is approximately $8 million. Her restaurants generate nearly $2 million a year in profit. Michael collapsed into his chair like he'd been punched. $8 million? Emily whispered. Why didn't you ever tell us? I leaned back, taking in their stunned faces. Because I wanted to see people's true character, I said. I needed to know if you loved me for who I am, not for what I have. But Mom, Michael stammered, I'm your son. How could you hide something like that from me? How could I hide it? I echoed, and the anger I'd swallowed for years finally found my voice. Are you really asking me that after everything you said tonight? I stood again, and my posture was different now. No longer a timid older woman, but a businesswoman who built an empire from nothing. Michael, for the last 5 years, ever since your career took off, you've treated me like a burden. You've made me feel ashamed of how I look, how I dress, how I live. A low murmur moved through the room. A few diners lifted their phones, trying to capture what was happening. Remember last Christmas? I went on. When you told me I shouldn't come because I wouldn't fit in with your important guests? Michael shrank. Mom, or Emily's birthday 6 months ago, I continued, when you said there was a dress code and mine wouldn't measure up. Emily stared down at her lap. All this time you assumed I was poor, a problem, someone to be hidden, and tonight you proved exactly what I feared. Charles stepped close and whispered, Mrs. Carter, would you like us to ask them to leave? Before I could answer, Michael jumped to his feet. Wait, Mom, if you have that much money, why live like you do? Why keep it secret? We're family. I let out a short, joyless laugh. Family? 15 minutes ago you told me to go eat outside like a beggar. Is that what family says? Emily reached for my hand. Linda, if you had known what? I cut in. If you'd known I had money, then you'd show me respect? Is that your idea of family love, respect that only exists when the bank account is big enough? A few tables hummed with approval. People were clearly following every word. Mom, please, Michael begged. Let's talk at home in private. In private? I gestured around us. Like when you humiliated me in public 5 minutes ago. When you told all these people I don't belong here. Mr. Anderson moved closer. Mrs. Carter, as the general manager over your properties, shall we take any specific action? Michael turned to him, desperate. Please, Mr. Anderson. He's my mother. There must be a way to fix this. Mr. Anderson's voice went cold. Young man, you've spent the last 30 minutes insulting the owner of this establishment, and you did it in front of dozens of witnesses. Emily started to cry. We didn't know. If we had known she owned it, we never would have what? I said. Never would have disrespected me. Do you only respect rich people? What kind of values are those? An elegant man nearby began to clap, slow and steady. Others joined in, not mockery but support. Michael finally noticed the entire room was watching him. Mom, everyone's staring. Yes, I said evenly. They're seeing the kind of person you are when you think your mother has nothing to offer you. But now I know you have money, he said, grasping at air. Now we know the truth, we can start over. I let out a bitter laugh. Start over? Now that I'm rich enough to be your mother? Emily wiped her cheeks and tried again. Linda, please forgive us. We didn't know. I pulled my hand away. An hour ago you said Michael was embarrassed to introduce me as his mother. You said I didn't have the education, the class, or the money to be here. Remember? She nodded, miserable. Well, you were right about one thing, I said. There are differences between us that can't be ignored, but they're not the ones you thought. I walked to the center of the dining room so everyone could see and hear me. My voice came out clear and sure. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting your evening, but since many of you witnessed what happened, you deserve the full story. The room fell silent, even the waiters paused. Michael started to rise, but Mr. Anderson set a firm hand on his shoulder. My name is Linda Carter and I own this restaurant, I said. For 7 years I've come here regularly, quietly, watching the operation, getting to know my team, making sure our guests receive the best possible service. I saw several faces change as they recognized me. The older woman in the corner who ordered the same thing, left generous tips and never made a fuss. But tonight I was invited by my own son, who publicly humiliated me, told me I didn't belong here and asked me to leave. A wave of disapproval moved through the room. Beggar. Sadness. Michael lurched to his feet. Mom, stop. You're destroying my reputation. I turned to him with a cool smile. You destroyed it yourself the moment you treated your mother like trash in front of all these people. Emily tried one last time. Please understand, there was no way to know that I had money? I cut her off. That's the excuse? You thought it was okay to disrespect me because you didn't know I was wealthy? An elegant woman nearby spoke up, clear and strong. Exactly. Respect shouldn't depend on how much money someone has. It's basic decency. Others agreed, voices rising. The room had shifted. It wasn't just a quiet fine dining evening anymore. It had become a lesson in dignity and family. I faced Michael and Emily. Now that you know the truth, here's how things are going to change. Michael looked stricken. Please, Mom, not here. Why not here? I said. You had no problem shaming me here. Charles brought a chair to the open space like it was a stage. I sat gracefully, feeling, for the first time in years, seen. Michael, I began, for the last 5 years since the day your salary jumped, you changed. You became arrogant, dismissive, and you forgot where you came from. Mom, don't interrupt, I said, my voice ringing through the room. You're going to listen. He sank down, defeated. Do you remember when you were 12 and came down with pneumonia? I asked. We didn't have insurance. I worked 3 jobs for 2 months to pay for your treatment. I worked days in an office, nights cleaning buildings, weekends in a restaurant. I slept 3 hours a night so you'd have what you needed. The room stayed utterly still. A few older women brushed away tears. Do you know why I did it? I said, meeting Michael's eyes. Because I loved you. Because you were my son. Not because you had money. Not because you could give me anything in return. A mother's love is unconditional. Emily began to cry again, different tears this time, as if she finally understood the weight of what they'd done. But you, Michael, I said softly, your love for me turned out to be conditional. You love me only when it's convenient, when I don't embarrass you, when I match your picture of success. From the back of the room an older gentleman called out, That's right, ma'am, tell them the truth. The approval in his voice steadied me even more. Now let me explain how I earned my money, I said, because it wasn't luck and it wasn't an inheritance. Michael looked up, curious in spite of the shame on his face. When your father died and you were 15, I was left with a mountain of debt and a child to raise. I didn't drown in self-pity, I fought. I rose and paced slowly around the table. I started as a waitress in a tiny place, but I didn't stop there. I watched, I learned, I studied everything. The kitchen flow, the books, the way you treat guests. The room had gone entirely still. Even the staff paused to listen. After 5 years with experience and savings, I took a loan and bought my first small restaurant. It was modest, in a humble neighborhood, and I turned it into a winner. Emily whispered, almost to herself, So that's why you know this business so well. Exactly, I said. I built this, piece by piece, with my own hands. Every new place came after I proved I could make the numbers work. Michael finally spoke, his voice rough. Mom, I didn't know any of that. You didn't know, I snapped, because you never asked. You weren't interested in my life, only in making sure I didn't embarrass you in front of your successful friends. Mr. Anderson approached. Mrs. Carter, would you like us to proceed? Proceed with what? Michael blurted, panic creeping in. I met his eyes, my smile cool. With the expulsion. As the owner, I can refuse service to anyone who causes a disturbance or disrespects guests. You can't, Emily cried. We're family. I let out a short, dry laugh. An hour ago I wasn't good enough to be in your family. Now that you know I have money, Suddenly I'm family, again. Applause broke out at several tables. People were openly rooting for justice. Michael stood desperate. Mom, forgive me, please. We can change. We can do better. You can change, I repeated quietly. You can be better. But the problem is, you only want to change now that you've learned I'm wealthy. I stepped close, looking right into his eyes. Tell me honestly, if I said this was all a joke, that I had nothing, would you go back to telling me to leave? He opened his mouth, but nothing came. His silence spoke louder than anything. Your silence says enough, I murmured, sadness and relief mixing in my chest. Emily tried one last angle. Linda, we really can change. Michael's under so much pressure at work, he hasn't been himself. I turned to her, my gaze cold. Pressure? That's your defense for humiliating an older woman, your husband's mother. A businessman at a nearby table rose. Ma'am, with respect, I work with Michael. He talks about you the same way he treated you tonight. He calls you my poor mother, and a burden I have to carry. Michael went sheet white. Mr. Thompson, that's out of context. Mr. Thompson actually laughed. At last month's executive meeting you said, quote, my mother is a simple woman who doesn't understand my standard of living. Sometimes it's embarrassing to explain why she can't come to important events. A ripple of outrage moved through the room. Michael tried to deny it, but the damage was done. You see, Michael, I said evenly, this isn't just about tonight. It's about how you really think of me. It's about the shame you feel for your own mother. I addressed the room again. For years I've watched my son turn into someone I barely recognize. Someone who values appearances over people, who's ashamed of his roots. I walked to the big front window, the city lights stretching beyond the glass. I started out at the bottom, washing dishes, wiping tables, serving people who didn't always treat me kindly. But I never lost my dignity. I turned back to him. And yet my own son has humiliated me more in these last years than any stranger ever did. Emily broke into harder sobs. Please, Linda, give us a chance. We can do family therapy. I let out a bitter laugh. You think a few sessions can fix years of contempt? Charles slipped up quietly. Mrs. Carter, sorry to interrupt. There are reporters outside. Looks like someone posted the story on social media. Should I keep them away? Michael shot up. Reporters? Mom, this could ruin my career. My boss will hear. Everyone at the company will know. Now you're worried about your career? I said steady. You weren't worried when you shouted at me in front of a full dining room. That was different, he pleaded. It was a private family conversation. I swept a hand around the room. You scream at your mother in public and call it private? Mr. Thompson spoke again. Michael, several colleagues are here tonight. Word has already reached the office. HR will review your behavior. Michael dropped back into his chair like he'd been hit. No. My career, my reputation. Your reputation, I said slowly, was wrecked by you the moment you decided it was acceptable to treat your mother like trash. He yanked his hand away as Emily reached for it. This is your fault, he snapped. You told me she was a burden. You told me to be ashamed. Emily shot to her feet. You're the one who complained nonstop. I just agreed with you. And there it was, the truth laid bare. They hadn't just hurt me tonight. They'd been feeding each other's contempt for years. Enough, I said, my voice firm. No more blaming. You're both responsible. I nodded to Mr. Anderson. Please bring the documents. Michael's voice cracked. What documents? Mr. Anderson returned with a thick folder, opened it and spread out several papers. These confirm, I said, that I own not only this restaurant, but a chain of 5 across the city. Emily stared. 5. Yes, I said. 5. Including the Willow Room where you celebrated your anniversary, Harbor End Vine, where Michael entertained his big clients last month, and the Copper Terrace where you had your birthday. Michael's head snapped up. You own all of those? That's right. Every time you showed off your status in those dining rooms, you were spending money in businesses that belonged to me. A soft wave of laughter rolled through the guests. The irony was delicious. But there's more, I continued, sliding out another document. This is my current will. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a fork drop across the room. In it, I left everything to my only son, Michael Carter, $8 million, 5 restaurants and several properties. Michael's eyes went wide. Left? Why are you saying left? I gave him a calm, unforgiving smile, the kind you wear when justice finally arrives. Because after tonight, after what you've shown me, that will is going to change. No. Michael shouted, leaping up so fast his chair crashed to the floor. Mom, please, Michael begged. I'm your only son. I'm your family. Family. I laughed bitterly. Michael, an hour ago you told me to eat on the street like a beggar. That's how you treat family. Emily stood too, panic flashing in her eyes. Linda, please think about this. Michael made a mistake, but he's still your son. Blood is more important than anything. Blood. I repeated slowly. Then tell me why my own blood has treated me worse than strangers. I turned to the whole room. Ladies and gentlemen, you've witnessed everything tonight. You've seen how my son humiliated me, how ashamed he is of me. Heads nodded. Diners' faces showed they agreed. Well, I said, then you'll also witness the consequences. I pulled my phone from my purse and dialed a number Michael didn't know. Good evening, Mr. Harris. Yes, it's Linda Carter. Please come to the Golden Crown right away with the papers we prepared. It's the new will. It's urgent. Michael froze. New will? You already prepared one. I ended the call and met his eyes. Michael, did you really think tonight was the first time you've humiliated me? You think I haven't noticed how you've treated me these last years? Emily jumped in desperate. Linda, don't you think this is too drastic? He's your only son. Drastic. I turned on her, my anger sharp but controlled. Emily, for 5 years your husband has pushed me out of his life. He made me feel like a stranger in my own family. I walked to the center of the restaurant so everyone could hear. My voice carried louder than I thought possible. Do you want to know why I lived simply despite having money? Why I chose a modest apartment, simple clothes, bus rides? I paused. Because I wanted to test something. I wanted to see if the people who said they loved me actually loved me for who I am, not for what I own. A murmur of understanding rippled across the tables. People got it. For 7 years, I continued, I lived quietly. And you know what I discovered? I looked straight at Michael, who now seemed to shrink in his seat. That my own son was ashamed of me. That he saw me as a burden. That he'd rather cut me out than admit his mother wasn't rich. Tears stung my eyes, but my voice stayed steady. Do you know what it feels like when your son tells you not to come to his wedding because you're not good enough for the venue? Gasps spread through the room. Older women covered their mouths, horrified. Mom, I never said it like that, Michael whispered. Didn't you? I pulled up my phone, scrolling. Here's your text. April 15th, 2023. I read it aloud. Mom, Emily and I have decided on a small wedding, just close family and important friends. I think it would be better if you didn't come. The venue is very elegant and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. The restaurant erupted with murmurs and angry glances. Some applauded softly in support of me. That text doesn't say you can't come, Michael tried weakly. Oh no. I kept reading. Most of the guests are my colleagues and important clients. I need to maintain a certain professional image. The silence that followed was heavy. Even Emily dropped her gaze. Maintain a professional image, I repeated slowly. Translation. Your mother would ruin your image. An older man in the back stood and said loudly, My mother always told me, the worst misfortune for a woman is an ungrateful child. Applause followed. Michael looked around, finally realizing the whole room was against him. Mom, please let's go home. We can talk privately. Home. I laughed bitterly. Which home? My little apartment that embarrasses you, or your mansion where I've never been welcome? Emily tried again. Linda, you've always been welcome. Welcome. I pulled out my phone once more. Let me read your messages, Emily. Her face drained of color. No, please. December 8th, 2024. Linda, we're hosting Christmas dinner with friends. It would be better if you came another day when we can spend more time with you. March 22nd, 2024. We have important guests this weekend. Maybe visit during the week when it's quieter. Every message sparked more whispers, more disapproving looks. Do you see the pattern? I asked the room. There was always an excuse. Always a reason I couldn't be there when the important people were. Michael slumped. Mom, we thought you preferred. Preferred what? I cut him off. Preferred being excluded? Preferred being alone. Just then, the doors opened and in walked a distinguished man with a leather briefcase. My lawyer, David Harris. Good evening, Mrs. Carter, he said formally. I brought the documents you requested. Michael bolted up. Documents? Mom, don't do this. Don't do something you'll regret. Regret? I smiled coldly. Michael, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. Mr. Harris opened his case and spread out papers. Here is the new will as well as the property transfer agreements. Property transfer? Emily's voice cracked. Yes, I said calmly. I've chosen to leave my fortune to charities that help the elderly forgotten by their families, and to loyal employees who have shown me more respect than my own blood. Brian, the waiter who had been serving us all night, stepped closer nervously. Mrs. Carter, are you sure you want to do this here in front of everyone? I smiled warmly at him. Brian, for 5 years you've been kinder to me than my son has. You've always treated me with dignity no matter how I dressed, no matter what you thought I could afford. He blushed. You've always been a classy lady, Mrs. Carter, and you always leave the biggest tips. Tips? Michael looked stunned. Brian answered for me. Your mother always leaves $100 tip, young man. And she always asks about our families, our struggles. She's the most generous guest we have. Michael's mouth fell open but no words came. That's right, I said firmly. While you assumed I was scraping by, I was supporting my employees, donating to charities and helping families in need. Emily whispered, How much have you given away? In the last 5 years, I replied, I've donated about $1 million. The room broke into applause, loud and spontaneous. While you were ashamed of me, I said, raising my voice, I was out here doing good. While you excluded me for not being sophisticated, I was showing more generosity than you've ever shown. Michael stood desperate. Mom, all that's fine, but I'm your son. I'm your only family. You can't just give it all to strangers. Strangers. I let out a sharp laugh. Brian knows me better than you do. Charles respects me more than you do. My employees have shown me more affection than you have in years. I turned to Mr. Harris. Sir, prepare the documents. I'll sign the new will tonight. No. Michael lunged toward the table, frantic. You can't do this. I'm your son. I have rights. Charles stepped in, firm and steady. Young man, control yourself. Mrs. Carter has every right to decide what happens with her fortune. This is madness. Emily broke down in loud sobs. Mom, please, Michael said desperately. I'm your only son. I'm your family. Family. I laughed, shaking my head. Michael, an hour ago you told me to eat on the street like a beggar. That's how you treat family. Emily stood, panic in her eyes. Linda, think about this. Michael made a mistake, but he's still your son. Blood is more important than anything. Blood is more important than anything? I repeated slowly. Then why has my own blood treated me worse than strangers? I turned to the dining room. Ladies and gentlemen, you've all witnessed what happened here tonight. You've seen how my son humiliated me, how ashamed he was of me. Now you'll also witness the consequences. I pulled out my phone, dialed a number. Good evening, Mr. Harris. Yes, this is Linda Carter. Please come to the Golden Crown right away with the documents we prepared. The new will. Yes, it's urgent. Michael froze. New will. You already had one prepared. I ended the call and looked him dead in the eyes. Michael, do you really think tonight was the first time you've humiliated me? You think I haven't noticed the way you've treated me these past 5 years? Emily tried again. Linda, don't you think this is too drastic? He's your only son. Drastic? I asked, voice trembling with controlled anger. Emily, for 5 years your husband has pushed me out of his life. He's made me feel like a stranger in my own family. I walked to the center of the room so everyone could hear. Do you want to know why I lived so simply despite having money? Why I chose a modest apartment, simple clothes, bus rides? Because I wanted to test something. I wanted to see if people who said they loved me actually loved me for me, not for my bank account. A hush fell over the diners. Some nodded in understanding. For 7 years I've lived like that, I continued. And you know what I discovered? That my own son was ashamed of me. That he saw me as a burden. That he'd rather cut me out than admit his mother wasn't rich. Tears welled in my eyes, but my voice didn't break. Do you know what it feels like when your son asks you not to attend his wedding, because you don't fit the level of the event? Gasps rang out. Older women shook their heads, some holding their hearts. Michael's face drained. Mom, I never said that. Oh, didn't you? I pulled up my phone. Here's your text, April 15th, 2023. I read aloud. Mom, Emily and I decided on a small wedding. Just close family and important friends. I think it's better if you don't come. The venue is very elegant and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. The crowd erupted, angry whispers, shocked faces, a few claps of support for me. That doesn't say you can't come. Michael protested. Oh no. I read further. Most of the guests are colleagues and important clients. I need to maintain a professional image. The silence that followed was crushing. Even Emily looked ashamed. Maintain a professional image, I repeated. Translated, my mother would ruin my image. From the back, an older man stood and called out, Ma'am, my mother used to say, an ungrateful child is a woman's greatest misfortune. Diners applauded his words. Michael looked around, finally realizing all eyes were on him. Mom, let's just go home, please. We'll talk in private. Home. I laughed bitterly. Which one? My little apartment that embarrasses you, or your mansion I've never been welcome in? Emily's voice shook. Linda, you've always been welcome. Welcome. I pulled up more messages. December 8th, 2024. Linda, we're hosting Christmas with friends. Better if you visit another day. March 22nd. We have important guests. Please come during the week instead. Gasps. Murmurs of disapproval. You see the pattern? I asked. There was always an excuse. Always a reason I wasn't good enough to be included. Michael slumped, broken. Mom, we thought you preferred. Preferred what? I cut him off. Preferred being excluded? Preferred being alone. The doors opened and in walked my lawyer, David Harris, carrying his leather briefcase. Good evening, Mrs. Carter. I've brought the documents. Michael bolted upright. Documents? Mom, don't do something you'll regret. Regret. I gave a cold smile. Michael, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. David opened the case, laying out papers. Here's the new will and the property transfers. Emily's voice cracked. Property transfers? Yes, I said firmly. My fortune will go to charities helping abandoned seniors, and to loyal employees who've shown me more respect than my own blood. Brian, the waiter, stepped forward nervously. Mrs. Carter, are you sure you want to do this here? I smiled warmly at him. Brian, for 5 years, you've treated me with more kindness than my son. Always respectful no matter what I wore or how I looked. He blushed. You've always been elegant to us, Mrs. Carter, and you leave the best tips. Tips. Michael looked lost. Your mother always leaves $100 tip, Brian said firmly. She asks about our families, our struggles. She's the most generous guest here. Michael's jaw dropped. That's right, I said, my voice steady. While you thought I scraped by, I was helping my staff, donating, supporting families. Emily whispered, how much? $1 million in the last 5 years, I replied. The restaurant broke into loud applause. While you were ashamed of me, I said, raising my voice, I was out here doing good. While you excluded me, I was giving more than you ever have. Michael was desperate. Mom, fine. But I'm still your son. I'm your family. You can't give everything to strangers. Strangers. I laughed sharply. Brian knows me better than you. Charles respects me more. My staff has shown me more affection than you in years. I turned to David Harris. Prepare the documents. I'll sign tonight. No. Michael lunged. You can't. I'm your son. I have rights. Charles blocked him firmly. Young man, compose yourself. Mrs. Carter has every right. This is madness. Emily cried hysterically. I paused, looking at my son, red eyes, broken face. For the first time in years, I saw real vulnerability. Not arrogance. Not pride. Just pain. Very well, I said slowly. If you truly want another chance, then here are my conditions. Michael nodded quickly. Anything, Mom. Anything. 1. For the next year, you and Emily will volunteer every weekend in a nursing home. No exceptions. Emily gasped, ready to protest. Michael stopped her. I accept. What else? 2. You will move out of your mansion and live on $1,500 a month. The same budget you thought I had. Michael paled. But my mortgage. What's wrong, Michael? I said sharply. You can't live on the budget you decided was good enough for your mother? Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. 3. You'll work part-time in one of my restaurants as a waiter. You'll serve and you'll learn humility. As a waiter? Emily cried. But Michael is an executive. Exactly, I replied. Time he learned what respect really means. Michael swallowed hard. I accept. What else? 4. You'll write public apologies. 1 to the local paper for your behavior toward the elderly. 1 to your company, admitting your lack of family values. His face drained. Mom, that would ruin my career. I laughed coldly. Your career? Michael, after tonight your career is already in ruins. At least this gives you a chance to save face with dignity. Mr. Thompson, his co-worker, stood. She's right. The company is already reviewing your behavior tonight. It violates our core values. Michael turned to him in panic. Mr. Thompson, please. I'm sorry, Thompson said firmly. But what we've seen is unacceptable. I looked back at Michael. See? Your career's already collapsing. My conditions are your only road to redemption. Michael's voice cracked. And the 5th. The most important, I said softly. For 1 year every week you and Emily will visit me. Not because I have money, but because I'm your mother. You'll spend time with me. You'll know me as a person, not as a burden. Emily whispered, That doesn't sound so hard. When was the last time you asked about my dreams, Emily? My fears? My life? She had no answer. And the 6th condition, I added. Michael stiffened. 6th. Yes. If during this year you fail at any point or if you show you're only doing this for the money, the will reverts. Everything goes to charity. David Harris nodded. That's legal, Mrs. Carter. We can write it exactly like that. Michael turned to Emily. She nodded reluctantly. I accept, Mom. I accept everything. Good, I said, picking up the pen. But remember this. Nothing you say tonight can erase what you did. The words, the shame, the humiliation, you put that into our history. And only your actions over the next year will show if you've learned anything. He nodded, tears streaming. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. Don't tell me you're sorry, I said firmly. Show me. I turned to my lawyer. Mr. Harris, prepare the conditional will. The crowd erupted in applause. Real applause, respect, admiration. Some even rose to their feet. Michael edged closer. Mom, may I hug you? I looked at him a long moment. Michael, hugs must be earned. Over the next year, you'll have to earn every hug, every smile, every moment of affection. He lowered his head, finally understanding. 6 months later, I sat at a corner table in the Golden Crown. The tension of that night was gone. The air was light, calm. Michael walked up in a black server's uniform, tray in hand. His face no longer showed arrogance or shame. In his eyes, I saw something new, genuine humility. Good evening, Mrs. Carter, he said with a smile that for the first time in years felt real. What would you like to order tonight? I smiled back, measured but warm. Michael, how was your day? He sat when I gestured. Difficult, he admitted. One customer yelled because his soup was too hot. Another complained I took 30 seconds too long to bring water. And a woman treated me like I didn't exist. And how did that make you feel? I asked gently, though I already knew the answer. Michael looked at me, ashamed. Mom, is this how I made you feel for years? Invisible. It was the first time he admitted it. I asked about Emily. He said at first she hated the small apartment and volunteer work. But after meeting Betty, an elderly woman abandoned by her kids, Emily broke down. She realized that's who I would have become if they kept treating me the way they had. The restaurant manager, Charles, praised Michael as hardworking and respectful. When we were alone, I asked, Are you doing this just for the inheritance? He admitted yes at first. But working here, hearing how staff admired me, seeing their struggles changed him. He realized how blind he'd been. Emily arrived, no longer flashy but sincere. She apologized for excluding me and admitted she had judged me only by money. Now I know true wealth isn't in a bank account, she said. I gave them an envelope with reports. Emily staying extra hours at the nursing home, Michael treating customers with respect, neighbors describing them as humble. My conclusion: they had started to change. Though 6 months couldn't erase 5 years. I set conditions. Michael would keep working at the restaurant and learn the business. They'd live modestly but not in luxury, and we would spend real time together as a family. Michael took my hand. Even without money, these months are the most valuable of my life. For the first time I cried openly. That's all I ever wanted to hear. He asked, "Can I hug you now?" "Yes, son," I said. "You've earned it." As he held me, I knew I hadn't lost him after all. By letting go of arrogance, he had become worthy, not of fortune but of love. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.